Hello, Rachel Baribeau here. Hope you are doing well. Founder of Changing the Narrative, and I am changing the world. So, wanted to check in today to talk to you about a couple of things that I've seen recently that have moved me greatly. Most recently, I've seen the movie Harriet, and if you have not seen this movie, this video is for nothing other than to play to your emotions, to your historical side, to the understanding part of your heart, to the growth part of your heart. So recently I saw the movie Harriet. I went on a solo date. So important. Self-care. It was awesome. I had popcorn all to myself. I was telling somebody about this the other night, and if had there been a camera on me in the movie theater, I think it would have been really funny. Because I was all like, whoa, there was a couple like way down to me to the left, but I was like crying, I was cheering, I was throwing up my hands, I was so animated because it was just me, myself, and I, and so it was amazing. And I say to everybody out there that you need to go see this movie to understand what African American slaves went through in that period, and what Harriet went through, and what she risked. And one of I took notes in the movie because I was by myself and I wasn't annoying other people. And one of the things she talked about was she got hit over the head early on when she was enslaved, and she said to somebody, she said, "This hole in my head just made God more clear." Now listen, that is the most amazing way to look at affliction. That is the most amazing way to look at a wrongdoing. That is the most amazing way to look at something that was evil and nefarious and ugly and hurtful physically and emotionally, and make something good out of it. The hole in my head just made God more clear. Like, what? Harriet, if I didn't already love you before, I love you now. And then she also talked about the stink of fear, how it literally puts off like an aroma and odor, and ton of other amazing quotes in this movie, so much so that I want to go back and see it again because it was just that amazing. But also, recently I have been listening to, I'm a huge history buff, Civil War, African American studies, having Jewish and Native American and Mexican blood myself. I'm just interested in what people went through. I'm interested in how they got to where they are today. I saw recently a group, I think it was Tulane doctors, went back to slave quarters there at the Whitney Plantation in the New Orleans area, and were pictured on the steps of slave quarters. And they were pretty much marking that as what their ancestors, like beyond their wildest dreams of what their ancestors thought that they could ever accomplish. And it was poignant, to say the least. But recently, I love podcasts as well. I have I'm Changing the Narrative podcast with Chad Doing. We put it out about every 2 weeks. But recently, I was listening to this podcast called 1619, and it's by a lady in the New York Times. Can't wait to meet you, Nicole Hannah Jones. And wow, oh wow. They go into the medical history and how African Americans were treated differently, and how acts in Congress and in the government came about in regards to African American healthcare. They talk about the birth of music, of jazz, of blues, of the minstrel show and blackface, and how that came about. They also she talked about in this discrimination, and she talked about the two facts that just blew my mind. One, you think about your mortgage at your house, right? So this crazy fact about how a mortgage began. A mortgage didn't begin back in the day with a house. Human beings were actually mortgaged back in Civil War days, before then, because you needed human beings to be able to work your crop. You needed human beings to be able to make money. And when I thought about that and just let that sink in, that somebody went to the bank and actually said, I need a mortgage on this many human beings. It just broke my heart. Broke my heart. And it also further broke my heart when I found out that the value, she said at one time, of slavery was more than all the railroads and the factories in the United States combined. Why am I sharing this? Why did I feel the need to make this video today? Because of the fact, one, all of this falls under the umbrella of changing the narrative, but I have this audacious idea. I have this audacious goal. Listen, we are not born hating. We are not born racist. And I tell football teams all the time, you are a microcosm of what can happen in the world. Pink, purple, black, white, all backgrounds, all colors, skins, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all different experiences, yet you come together for a common goal and good, and you love each other and you have each other's back. And so I got to thinking when I was in the movie Harriet, and I even actually went up to a police officer afterwards and told him my idea, and he just kind of nodded at me like I was a little crazy, but I am crazy. But I had this audacious idea and thought that maybe you're watching this right now. Maybe you are, maybe there's somebody that needs to see this video, but listen to me. There are people out there that grew up in homes where they grew up hating. They grew up using the N-word. They grew up thinking that Mexicans were spics and wetbacks. My family was called that. They grew up thinking that if you were different, you were somehow less than. I mean, that was the thought back in pre-Civil War, Civil War days, that somehow African Americans were like not as smart, not, just crazy, built different. We are all the same. We are all built the same. We all bleed the same. We all feel the same, right? And in a day and age in which we're so divided, I want to have this invitation to come together, to understand each other more. So here's what I know. I know that there are a lot of people out there that were born into households with hatred. They were born into households saying, don't date him, he's a different color, or you can't do that, or whatever it is, just racist ideologies. And so if that's you, or if that's somebody that listen to me, you don't have to be that way. You don't have to feel that way. As I often tell young men and young women, particularly young men when I speak to them with changing the narrative, is you're not your daddy. You don't have to repeat the sins of your father. And I heard T.D. Jakes talking about it the other day. You listen, you don't have to follow that pattern. You can break out of that pattern. But if that's what you saw, I understand that's kind of the way that you go. That's what you tend to do. You follow actions, not words. But I am here to tell you, you don't have to do that. I am here to tell you that you can change. You can learn to love. You can learn to tolerate, and not just tolerate, to accept and to celebrate. Some of the greatest stories I have ever heard are former KKK or white supremacist members that have come to refuse all of that, all the ideology, everything, and come to be understanding and beautiful and non-racist, right? I remember when I was in Israel, and this is not just a black and white thing. I remember when I was in Israel, a friend of mine who was not Jewish and was from over in Palestine, was Palestinian, and he said he was raised in a refugee camp, and he was raised with the ideology to hate. He was raised to think that Jews were bad. And he was working in this restaurant, and there was this Jew that came in a lot. And as God would have it, and as fate would have it, a man that he thought he needed to hate, that he thought was the enemy, they ended up becoming friends. And he ended up teaching him that not all Jews are bad, right? And so this happens, and it's some of my favorite stories of people changing their former belief and coming into something more beautiful, changing the narrative, changing the world. So here's my thought to you. Send this video out, share it. You don't have to tag somebody, but share it and And listen, if that's you, you don't have to say anything publicly. Drop me a message, send me a message, say, Rachel, I want to learn more. I want to listen to 1619. I want to go see Harriet. I know what my parents said or my grandparents said was wrong, and that it was dangerous and that it was hateful. It is not too late. We need people, even if you're like, man, I love every color, I'm good. You can still do better. You can still do more. We can still promote. We can still love. We can still spread joy and peace. And so I just want to invite you to change. I just want to invite you to radical change, to helping me change the narrative, change the world. So today, for me, check out 1619, the podcast, Nicole Hannah Jones. This is just me loving these things and wanting to share my heart with you. And go see Harriet. Go see Harriet. You will absolutely love it. And if that's you, man, if you grew up, do not be ashamed. If you grew up with a grandpa or grandma or a dad or mom that said Jews are bad or Palestinians are bad or all Jews are bad or all Palestinians are bad or the N-word or thought that another race was inferior just because of the color of their skin, man, I invite you to better. I invite you to change. I invite you to change the narrative. Love y'all. You can get more information on everything that I'm doing at I am, the letter I am, changingthenarrative.org. Love y'all. Have a great day.